For some of you, I probably don't even need to introduce her, but I will anyways. I would like to introduce you to an economist, but also the writer of Why Women Earn Less and What We Can Do About It. Her book is nominated for the Management Book of 2022. And also a few other listings. So it's a very, very good book, and I definitely recommend to read it. On her Monday, she usually writes her columns for Het Financieel Dagblad. So please give a warm welcome to Sophie van Gool.
Thank you for the introduction, and very nice to be here with you today. I'm going to start by asking a few questions to you. And we don't have an official voting system, so just shout your answer if you know what is the right answer. So we're going to talk about the pay gap today. And of course, my first question to you is, how much money do women lose due to unequal pay in their working life? And I have 4 options to make it a little bit easier. Is it 50,000, 100, 150, or 300,000? And if you know it, you may just... D. C? Who thinks it's C? Who thinks it's D? Yes, you're very well informed. It's answer D, 300,000 euros. So it's pretty sad. It's a lot of money. And this is an average for the Netherlands. And I guess most of you work in the private sector, and there the pay gap is larger than in the public sector. Maybe some of you earn more than the average salary, so then unfortunately you're also gonna lose out on more than average. So it may very well be that for you personally, this pay gap is more than 300,000 euros. So yeah, that is pretty sad news. And then if you look on the internet, and maybe, I don't know if you're on Twitter, but that will make you a little bit doubt if it's really a pay gap. You will see stories like this. Don't buy into the myth of the gender pay gap. The gender pay gap is not really true. You will find people saying it's a myth, it's all individual choices by women, and if you correct for everything, if you're really comparing apples to apples, it's not really true. Or even women actually make more money than men do. Men are really not happy about that if it happens. And also people will say, yeah, it's actually illegal to pay someone more than someone else for the same job. Well, that's true, but I think we all know that there are more things that are illegal, but still they happen every day. So maybe you recognize some of these stories, and maybe you will also find them in your own company, or if you're on a birthday party or talking to your uncle or your neighbor who will tell you, well, it's not really true. So next time you talk to them, hopefully you can answer, how does it really work, this pay gap? So first, I'm going to show you some numbers, and then we'll talk about the reasons what's behind this pay gap. So first, some figures. On average, in the Netherlands, women earn 36% less per year than men do. So that's really the amount you will get on the bank account, 36% less. So that's a lot. And it means that about half of the women in the Netherlands are not financially independent. So they earn less than a minimum wage. So pretty sad. Then there's a lot of people saying, yeah, but women work part-time. And it's true, a lot of women work part-time. So if you correct for that, and you look at the hourly wage, then you will see that the pay gap is a little bit smaller. I don't know what's wrong with this. Really hard? Yes. Thank you. And you will see that it's 19% average per hour, and that's for the private sector in the Netherlands. And then again, there's people saying, yeah, but that's not a good comparison because you're comparing all men to all women. And that's true. And they're saying, yeah, but women, they're not represented in senior positions. That's true, and that's part of the problem, if you ask me. But even if you correct for that, and you're really trying to compare, so people could say, okay, well, the first comparison is like, put all the fruits together. It's really everyone, part-time, full-time, etc. The second one, you're comparing per hour, but it could be called apples to pears. But the third one is really apples to apples, and still there's an unexplained gap that's 7%. So it means that every month you're earning almost a monthly salary, or every year you're losing almost a monthly salary compared to your male colleague who's doing exactly the same job and maybe working a little bit less hard than you, or being a little bit less accurate, or missing out on his deadlines. And that's just 1 year. So imagine every year of your life, counting also towards your pension, your savings, etc. It's a lot of money. So what are some of the reasons behind this gap? Or, question to you, what is the main reason? So you can guess again. Is it women working part-time? Is it a glass ceiling? Women working in sectors that pay poorly? Work done by women is valued less? All of the above? Or, I don't get it, but please solve this for me. Shout again your answers. F. You're already depressed about this news. E. Yeah, of course, it's a little bit of a trick question, but what I want to show you is that there's not one main reason for the pay gap, and that's also what it makes it so complicated to solve it. If it was easy, we didn't have this after women have been trying to close it for maybe 100 years. So there are many factors that contribute to the pay gap, and I want to explain a few of them. So first, there's this story about part-time work, or as I prefer to call it, paid and unpaid work. So you will hear a lot of people saying, yeah, women, they are not working enough and they should do more, and they are lazy and they are doing yoga. If you read the Dutch newspapers for the international people, you will read a lot of this. But if you look at the numbers, and the OECD measures this, paid and unpaid work, you see that actually men and women are doing almost exactly the same hours of work, but for women, about half of the working day is unpaid work, so childcare, housekeeping, but also care for elderly parents or family members. And for men, it's a lot less. So in my book, I also write, well, we shouldn't ask ourselves why women are supposedly not working, but why we're not paying them for the work they do. So that's one factor. Then another factor that shocks me a little bit is pregnancy discrimination. 43% of women in the Netherlands experience some kind of discrimination, and also it has not reduced for the last 10 years. So it's a huge issue. And maybe it's even larger because not all women recognize this. And sometimes it's really obvious, like you would not expect that it still happens, but women get an email like, hey, you're pregnant, so we cannot extend your contract. Pretty sad, but at least you could go to court or make a case about that. But much more often, it's a little bit subtle, and employers will say, well, you don't get the promotion, or it will be a little bit later, or maybe you should not participate in that course because you're so tired now. So there's a lot of ways of pregnancy discrimination, and of course, it also influences the pay gap. But there's more. There's also the glass ceiling. And once I was at an event, and one man said, yeah, it shouldn't be called a glass ceiling. It sounds way too sweet. Actually, it's a thick layer of white men. And I was like, yeah, I like it. So what is this thick layer of white men? Well, the New York Times has a really nice way to describe it, the glass ceiling index. And they are counting the number of executives named John, comparing it to the number of executives who are female. And it's more or less the same number. In the Netherlands, you can do the same thing with Peter, and I heard that in Norway it's the same with Arne. So every country has its own stereotype white man who is occupying a lot of these important positions. And of course, these are the people who generally have the highest salary. So if there's few women, there's not so many women with a very good salary. But that's not everything, because then some people say, yeah, but women also choose to work in these jobs that don't pay a lot. They are, you know, nurturing, they love caring, and they don't care about money. But is it true? Or maybe it's a little bit more complicated, because research shows that as women take over a male-dominated field, the pay drops. Was already in the 1970s, French feminist and sociologist Eveline Sullerot, and she described this. She said it's not that women choose jobs that pay poorly, it's that a job and an industry as a whole will decrease in salary as soon as women start to do this job. So it's pretty sad news, but it's really true. It has been researched, and we can see it, for example, with medical doctors, GPs, but also with judges. Those are jobs that previously were done mostly by men. Nowadays it's done mostly by women. And over time, over the last 40, 50 years, also it changed really. It decreased in salary and status and everything. So pretty sad. And actually, sometimes it also happens the other way around. What I describe in my book, that actually for programming, computer programming, used to be really a women's job when it started in the 1960s. Was not so popular, salary was not so great. And look where it is today. Great salaries and almost only men doing it. So we've seen that women take on a large part of the unpaid work. They're almost not getting to the boardroom level. They're working in industries that pay poorly. And also they are segregating into jobs that pay poorly. Oh yeah, and this is one thing in the COVID crisis. We saw that the jobs that we now think of as really crucial, like childcare and healthcare, nurses, 2/3 of them are done by women. And we also know that the salaries in those jobs are typically not so great, even though we now know that our society cannot function without them. So what we also see is that within sectors, so we see it between industries, but also if you look within companies, one example are airlines, where you see pilots, mostly men with a very good salary, and pursers, who are mostly women with not so great salary. This is one example, but if you start to look in your own company, I'm pretty sure you can find the same things. You will find some departments like HR or finance sometimes where it's mostly women, the salaries are not great, and you're gonna see commercial roles or IT, tech roles, mostly men, and the salaries are much better. And then, even if you correct for all of this, and you're really comparing men and women doing the exact same job, having the same level of education, women still get less. So men just tend to go for higher paying jobs like doctor, engineer, and CEO, whereas women go for lower paying jobs like female doctor, female engineer, and female CEO. It is the sad truth. But, as Yara said, my book is called Why Women Earn Less and What We Can Do About It. So I don't want to leave you here being all sad about this news. So we're going to talk about solutions. What can we do about it? Oh, and there's actually things you can do. And I know the audience is a little bit mixed because some of you will lead companies, others will be employees. But for everyone, there's something you can do. And the first thing you can do is to be transparent about salaries. Because research shows, and it also makes a lot of sense, that the more transparency there is about salaries, the smaller the pay gap. And you can do this on a company level if you're in that position. I know some companies that are just publishing all the salaries on a Google Drive. So any differences, they will be solved very quickly. But also on a smaller scale. If you're not leading a company, you can just talk to your colleagues, talk to your friends, and know how much others are earning. And don't only talk to women, but especially also talk to men to see what the differences are. And if you find out there are some differences, or if you just want to earn more, you can, of course, negotiate about your salary. And there's a lot of people saying, yeah, it's all about women. Because of women, they don't negotiate, they don't ask for the salary. Well, research shows it's not true. Women ask for raises as often as men. It's a research from Harvard Business Review. But they are less likely to get it. And that probably has to do with biases, because not only women, but everyone prefers to negotiate with someone from the same gender or race or background. And as the picture we saw in the beginning, with all the Johns, the white men occupying these board positions, the probability that as a woman you will meet someone who looks like you is a lot lower. So it's generally more difficult for you to negotiate. And also with my company, Salarisstijger, we're helping people negotiate. And sometimes it's really striking, the arguments that women hear. And sometimes it's like, yeah, but your husband also has a good salary, right? So why should you make that much money? It really happens, and more often than you think. And also really in what you would think of as, at least from the employer brand, as like good companies, irresistible organizations, but inside they are not. So if you can negotiate about your salary and also help colleagues, friends, so also to the men who are here, help your female colleagues, because this can make a difference. One more question to you. We're getting almost to the end, but this is interesting. I'm curious if you know, when did equal pay become a human right? Anyone who knows it by heart? Can guess. 60s? What? 95? Anyone else? 2 jaar geleden? 2020? But these are some options. What do you think? Who thinks A? B? Thinks B? C? A little bit. D? Okay, so it's a little bit mixed between C and D. Actually, it's A. In Europe, it was one of the laws in the Treaty of Rome, which was the start of the European Union in 1957. And in the Netherlands, actually, we had to wait a lot longer, so it was until 1975. So both A and B are correct. But just to show that equal pay has been a human right mandated by law for 65 years now. So it's pretty sad that it's still not practiced at all, almost. And that every year we can see that there's still a pay gap. So that's also one thing I want to emphasize. Equal pay is a human right. So also if people say, yeah, but there are explanations or women should just negotiate more, well, maybe it can help solve it, but it is not the responsibility of one individual woman. It's really of every employer that should solve this. So that's good to remember. And what we can do about this to make sure that actually the laws are put into practice is also strike and, of course, vote for political parties that want to actually implement this right. So this is a picture of Iceland in 1975. And what the women did there, one day they organized a women's strike. And they were striking from all the work they had. So from their paid jobs, but also from all the work in the house, from the childcare. They were not doing anything. And almost every woman in Iceland participated in that day. And as a result of that, the whole country came to a standstill because they couldn't do anything, of course, without the women. A lot of men, they had to bring their kids to work, and on the radio you could hear like these children's voices. Female journalists, they were not submitting anything for the newspaper, so the next day like half of the newspaper was empty. A lot of shops had to close, factories had to close. And that day Iceland really, the women really showed like, hey, you cannot do anything without us. Some of our work is unpaid or invisible, but it's really important for society. Well, nowadays Iceland is still one of the best countries for women to live, so I'm sure it had a good impact. And now I'm working on a strike similar to this in the Netherlands in November of this year. So if you want to participate, please let me know or follow me on social media, and you will hear more about it soon. So that's one thing also we can do, and it also helps to make politicians really focus on this topic. And then the last thing, because I think still most of you are working in business and you want to know, okay, what can I do in my company? And that's really also related to figures, is really to measure and close the pay gap. And that's really interesting research they did where they were asking, okay, to CEOs and to people leaders, hey, do you care about the pay gap? Everyone's like, yeah, really important, equal pay. And then you ask, okay, but do you think there's a pay gap? It exists. Yeah, it exists. But does it exist in your organization? No. Not in my company. So 75% of CEOs think in their company there's no pay gap. But in reality, there's only a very, very small portion who have investigated it. So most of them, they don't know. They are like, I close my eyes. I don't want to know what's in there. So if you're a CEO or a CHRO, please do it, actually research it. And if you work somewhere, I hope today will inspire you to push them a little bit and to challenge them on that it's really important to do this, to check it, and of course then also to close it. So good luck with that, and I'll hand over to Ingrid.
Well, thank you, Sophie. Very good to have some clarification on the apples. And I think your message is clear that we all need to do something about this.